So, President Trump recently called on the DEA to reschedule marijuana. So does this mean rescheduling is imminent? Well, former President Joe Biden similarly called on the DEA to reschedule. That was in 2021. And so far, the DEA hasn't done squat. Okay, that's not 100% accurate. They did do squat. They made announcements, they held a public comment period, various things. What they didn't do was make any serious effort to actually reschedule. They just did a lot of stuff that would help them delay, thinking the next president would not care. The difference is, this time, the DEA is headed by somebody appointed by Donald Trump. Maybe this is the year marijuana will be rescheduled. But first, let's talk about what scheduling is and why it is so important. And trust me, rescheduling marijuana is a BFD. Dave's not here, man. Hi, I'm Stoner Dave, and let's dive right into it. First, what is scheduling? Scheduling is like a ranking for drugs that are covered by the 1970 Controlled Substances Act. That was passed in the wake of rampant drug use in the 1960s. What the government did was take any drug that could, get you high, and they made it either illegal or they controlled it. So there were restrictions on who could get it. They did leave out nicotine and alcohol, interestingly enough. I'm not saying corporate interests had anything to do with that, but, I am going to say corporate interests had a lot to do with that. Anyway, being a controlled substance means everyone who touches it needs to be licensed to do so. They need to keep meticulous records, and they can sell or pass the controlled substances on only to someone else who also has a license. That starts from the manufacturer to the distributor, all the way finally to the retail seller. And to you. You need a prescription to get a controlled substance. So as not to lump in extra strong aspirin in the same category with heroin, they created a ranking, what they refer to as the schedule. The ranking runs the gamut, from Satan's brew at one end of the spectrum to, chicken soup at the other. The thing is, what the DEA thinks is Satan's brew versus chicken soup is kind of crazy. It almost seems like these guys don't know squat about the drugs they regulate, because probably they don't. Okay, so let's have a look at the schedule. You could see marijuana is in the same category as heroin, fentanyl, and LSD. I feel like I don't even need to comment on how stupid that is. And look down below at the benzodiazepines. We're talking about drugs like Valium, Xanax, and Ativan. The DEA thinks they have a low probability of abuse? Really? Yeah, these guys are clueless. I can speak from my own experience and tell you that benzodiazepines are very habit-forming, highly addictive, they have a very good chance of abuse, and if you stop taking them suddenly, you can go into shock and die. I am not making that up. But in the mind of the DEA, weed is more dangerous than that? Okay. These guys don't know squat. And keeping Schedule 1 for marijuana is also hypocritical. There are pharmaceutical products on the market that are authorized by the FDA. So very obviously, there is a medical use for THC. Very obviously, weed should not be Schedule 1. And even the product that is nothing but a synthetic version of THC is a Schedule 3 drug. That makes no sense. It is the same drug. Why, for so long, the DEA has obstinately hung on to keeping marijuana in Schedule 1 is absolutely baffling. But I can tell you, if the DEA ever does get their head out of the dark place in which it now resides, it would be huge. I'll tell you why. Because marijuana is Schedule 1, the federal government treats dispensaries roughly the same way they would treat an illegal drug dealer. Most banks do not want to deal with marijuana money lest the feds accuse them of laundering money for a drug cartel, i.e. your local dispensary. That's why it's mostly a cash business. And even worse, because the entire business is considered illegal under federal law, they cannot deduct their business expenses. But the federal government still wants them to pay tax. So marijuana businesses get hit with massive tax bills. Sometimes they're paying 70%. That's around 20 to 25% for most businesses. So that's a pretty big expense they're carrying. And because the business is illegal under federal law, they also can't declare Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, or any other chapter for that matter. The worst is how scheduling hits your wallet. If everyone in the business is getting hammered with high taxes, they're spending extra on security to deal with the cash, and all kinds of workarounds that constrain them in so many other ways, that pushes off their costs. Those are costs that they pass on to you and me. Rescheduling to a more sensible category would allow marijuana businesses to go from operating in this somewhat risky gray zone to being like mainstream ordinary businesses, just like every other one in the country. It would also allow interstate commerce. Because marijuana is Schedule 1, it cannot be transported across state lines. This means every state is like its own little insulated market. That means an economy of scale is pretty much impossible to get. An economy scale means if you make a certain amount of something, each unit becomes cheaper if you're able to sell more of them. So imagine you're a grower, you have fixed costs. You're probably growing indoors, you have rent on the facilities, you have all the electricity, everything. But there are only 40 or 50 dispensaries in your state that you could sell to. What if suddenly you could sell to dispensaries across the country and you had hundreds or thousands of potential customers? Suddenly the cost, the fixed cost of your rent and electricity and all of that isn't so high compared to how much product you are selling. That allows you to lower prices because you can do so. You don't need to make as much on each unit. And let's just take a look of how big the potential market really is. 24 states have legalized recreational marijuana, while 40 states have medical programs. Over 70% of Americans live in a state with either a medical or a recreational marijuana law. That's 244 million people. And 54% of people live in a state with legal recreational marijuana. That's 188 million people. Being able to access this as one single market could dramatically increase competition, which means we as consumers would get much more choice and lower prices that would save us a lot of money. Let's hope that's what happens. I'm not a lot confident, but we'll wait and see. Until then, we'll just have to live with the stupid situation we have now. I'm Stoner Dave signing off. Stay baked. Dave's not here, man.